let's start with some definitions.
Yeah.
Like what constitutes left-wing
Yes.
as opposed to right-wing authoritarianism, let's say.
Right. So there are measurement issues across the board, but that is with respect to both left and right-wing authoritarianism. There are questionnaires, commonly used questionnaires to assess right-wing authoritarianism and to assess left-wing authoritarianism. They're different. The reason, let me give a little context. For a long time, people tried to develop nonpartisan authoritarianism scale, as if authoritarianism was a psychological construct rather than a political one.
Right.
And they couldn't really do it because one of the core toxic elements of authoritarianism is a motivation to crush, deprive of humanity and human rights one's political opponents. So you need to assess either right or left-wing authoritarianism vis-a-vis the attitudes towards one's opponents in order to measure the construct. Okay.
Right, so that's a very interesting definition though, because you're pointing to the fact that arguably, and tell me if you think this is right, the core of authoritarianism, which, as you said, can't be measured outside the political, isn't precisely political. It's your attitude towards those who don't agree with you.
Yes, it is.
But you have to have some beliefs for that.
I didn't say can't. I say they have not succeeded. Actually, one of my current graduate students is, for her master's thesis, in the process of trying to develop a nonpartisan authoritarianism
based
scale.
On that idea.
Yes, based on that idea. Well, I don't know if she's going to succeed.
I'm thinking about that clinically. Yes. It's like, well, that's where you'd start to look at overlap between cluster B personality psychopathology, narcissism, borderline personality disorder, histrionic, because those are the people who are very likely to elevate their own status at the cost of other people, including their children, and those they purport to love.
So the first step to do that is to develop scales that survey questions that adequately get at left or right-wing authoritarianism, and then correlate them with things measuring narcissism or sadism or whatever. People have done that on the left, and it does correlate with left-wing authoritarianism. Yeah. I don't know, you never know for sure the limits of your own knowledge. So I don't know if anyone has even tried to do this on the right, or maybe they have, and it doesn't actually correspond with narcissism on the right. It corresponds with other things on the right, but not so much with, if there's evidence on narcissism correlating with right-wing authoritarianism, I don't know it.
Data brokers, those invasive tech companies, spy on your online activity, compromising your freedom. They monitor every click, action, and word, then compile and sell this information to corporations and foreign governments. These entities don't care about your welfare. That's why we use ExpressVPN, a company dedicated to protecting you from these Big Brother surveillance operations. With ExpressVPN, your entire online activity flows through secure, encrypted tunnels, ensuring complete privacy. No one, no data brokers, big tech companies, or even your internet provider can track your online behavior. ExpressVPN masks your IP address, the digital identifier that enables data brokers to collect and sell your information to questionable companies. That's why we at the Daily Wire are proud to partner with ExpressVPN. Both our hosts and production teams rest easy amidst their busy travel schedules, knowing their data isn't being compromised or sold regardless of where they're using the internet. Plus, for U.S. customers, ExpressVPN's new Identity Defender feature removes your data from brokers' databases, monitors the dark web for your compromised information, and alerts you to unauthorized social security number usage. Using ExpressVPN is about defending your fundamental right to privacy. As our lives increasingly move online, more of our personal information becomes vulnerable to surveillance. Protect yourself with ExpressVPN today. Find out how you can get 4 months free by scanning the QR code on screen, clicking the link in the description box below, or by going to expressvpn.com/JordanYT.
Nothing at the moment comes to mind. I have a memory of something associated with that because I've tried to follow the literature, but I've definitely seen it emerge on the left.
Yeah.
Correlations on the right. Well, from what I remember, and I'm vague about this because I can't give you sources, is that dark tetrad traits stand out quite markedly as associated with authoritarianism. And I thought that was somewhat independent of whether it was left or right. But I can't provide the sources at the moment.
And
I review them in this new book I wrote on We Who Wrestle with God. There's a lot of reference to the dark tetrad, personality constellations, and the political manifestations. But you've been studying it. Okay, so when we looked at the way we developed our measure, because I'd like to know how you developed yours, is we took a very large sample of political opinions and then factor analyzed them to find out if we could identify first clumps of left-wing and clumps of right-wing belief, which you can clearly identify, and then to look within the left-wing constellation to see if there is a reliable subcategory of clearly authoritarian proclivities. And we found the biggest predictor of left-wing authoritarianism was low verbal IQ. It was a walloping predictor, negative 0.40, immense predictor. So that's something to because one of the things we talked about at the beginning of the podcast was that some of these ideas sound good in the absence of further critical evaluation. Then you might say, well, if you lack the capacity for deep verbal critical evaluation, what apparently moral ideas would appeal to you? And well, you can imagine that there might be a set of them, and one of them would be, well, don't be mean to people who aren't like you, which is a perfectly good rule of thumb. But that doesn't mean it doesn't mean that everyone who says that's what they're for are in fact agitating on behalf of that principle. Okay, so back to your research.
Okay, so first let me be clear. We're other than my student Sonia, who is trying to develop a nonpartisan authoritarianism scale, the work that we have done using either left-wing or right-wing authoritarianism scales are scales developed by other people. We haven't developed the scales. So for left...
And do you think there are good scales now for left and right-wing authoritarianism? Adequate scales?
Adequate for right, yes, and pretty good for left. Even though the research on left is much more recent, you might think it would be therefore less well established. There's two teams, one led by Luke Conway and a different one led by Tom Costello, have done a lot of very good, both psychometric, the sort of statistical assessment of how things hang together, and also validity assessment of their two slightly different, somewhat different scales.
You can tell if someone's belief is part of a set of identifiable beliefs if they hold that belief, the fact they hold that belief predicts reliably that they hold another belief, right? And then you want to see a pattern like that emerge across a lot of people. Then you see that there are associations of ideas, right? Those would be something like the manifestation of an ideology. You want to see if that's identifiable, what its boundaries are, that it can be distinguished from other clumps of ideas, so left could be distinguished from right. This can all be done statistically and very reliably. Right. Now, it wasn't done by social psychologists from the end of World War II till 2016. Right. Shameful lacuna in the history of political analysis within the psychological community. It shocked me when I first discovered it.
Me too. It
was shocking. Really?
But talk about blind spots.
Oh my God. It's like, do you guys miss Mao and Stalin?
I know, right. How do you miss that?
How do you miss that? It's like, it's fairly obvious.
And then they're denied
social psychologists, the biggest social movements of the biggest pathological social movements of the 20th century had their existence denied for 70 years. Mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling.
I've never recovered from discovering it. It took me like a year to even believe it was true. Okay, so you're using other people's questions. So what's your approach? How are you investigating this?
It does depend on the study. So this is one good one that I think I can describe shortly, quickly. We administered cartoons, like political cartoons, as if they were memes, like social media memes, to an online sample, about 1,000 people, and asked them how much they liked the cartoons and memes, and we told them to vote for one that their favorite, because the one that received the most votes we would actually post on social media. Now that was a lie, it was deception, and we explained that at the end. But we wanted them to believe that when they were selecting something that this was as close as we get to a behavior. It was close to them posting it. They believed their vote could influence what would be posted.
Right. So it was a real world outcome.
A real world quasi behavioral
that would be promoted
rather than just like liking or disliking.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So
or self-report that they believe something.
That's right. So I'm going to describe two of the cartoons, which were quite a contrast to each other. We actually had a set kind of like the first and a set like the second.
Okay.
But I can describe the two quickly enough. The first was actually a political propaganda cartoon from the Soviet Union. We didn't tell them that, from the 1930s, 1940s, anti-American propaganda. But we didn't tell them that. We just presented the cartoon, which showed a long-distance shot of this. In the top panel was a long-distance shot of the Statue of Liberty. The bottom panel was a close-up of her head and her crown, and the spires of the crown were KKK members. People dressed in KKK, whatever.
Right.
Thing, right?
So the true nature of American liberty.
American liberty
so that's
is
a power reference.
It's
typical Marxist trope.
Yes, right, okay. That was one.
Yeah.
And then the second was an image of a diverse group of people, different racial and ethnic groups, wearing clothes for different professions. So it might be a bus driver or a businessman or a secretary or a teacher or whatever. There were a whole bunch of different kinds of people in obviously different roles, kind of in a crowd with their arms around each other under an American flag. Sort of pluralistic diversity. That's kind of a humanistic form of diversity. And then we simply ask people, we ask them, which ones do you like the most? Which ones do you want to share on social media? And
So was that a benevolent left view?
Yeah,
and
a benevolent
left view.
Yes,
That's
exactly. Right. That's right.
Demonizing
America versus
we did find in our analysis that there's a liberal left that's clear, and there's a authoritarian left, and the liberal left. This is part of our investigation. The liberal left isn't. Now, did we figure that out? The liberal left doesn't partake of the attitudes of the radical authoritarian leftists. But they're the ones that I also think that the
sort of oblivious
denies. Yeah, they're oblivious.
Yes, I think that's true. That is what we found. That's what we found in the study.
I got a research idea. That's relevant to this. Well, with regards to these questionnaires, it's something that I wanted to do.